is going to be a little bit different kind of a trip. There's been a crash. I'll explain more when we get out into the area, but for now I've got about an hour and a half of driving to do. According to my GPS, this is the site of the crash. This doesn't look right at all. I'm on national forest land up in the Coast Range, not very far from the ocean here. The crash actually happened 6 years ago, and it was a drone that was crashed by a very novice pilot. Now, this was 2018, nearly 6 years ago. Lucy and I were on a little excursion up through the Coast Range along with my friend Sean. The road looks right. We came down along this stretch. And I had the drone flying high overhead, looking down at us. As I said, I was definitely a novice with the drone. It was my very first drone. It was a little DJI Spark. I had done quite a bit of practice flying around town. This trip was my very first trip with it, very first flight filming with it. It went terribly wrong. So what happened was, the drone decided its battery was low enough that it needed to go back home. Being a novice, I did not know how to cancel it. The best thing would have been for me to cancel the return to home and just bring it down right where I was. But as I was fumbling around on the controls, the drone just beelining straight, not following the road, but beelining straight towards the spot where I launched, just ran right into the top of a tree. And this was like a 200-foot tall fir tree. Fortunately, I actually looked up, I saw it hit the tree, and I was thinking, oh gosh, my drone is gonna come tumbling down 200 feet. Well, no, it's a very small, lightweight drone, and it actually just stayed. It stayed up there in the top of the tree. There was no way to recover it. There was no way to climb up that high. We couldn't move the tree. Obviously, weren't gonna cut down that tree. The problem is, that tree is no longer there. It didn't look quite right when I drove up, and so before I even stopped, I drove both directions a couple of times, just like seeing if maybe somehow the GPS marker that I left was incorrect. But this is the spot. There is some like old tree cutting debris here, some old cut logs. Those trees clearly must have got cut down. It has been 6 years. We are kind of up on this ridge, and I suppose any of a number of storms also could have brought either or both of those trees down. In the meantime, it has really grown up with all kinds of undergrowth, and it looks like blackberry. And yeah, so for years I've thought about coming back up in here and like flying my drone up to the top of that tree to see if I could see it possibly still perched up in there, or else just scouting around underneath to see if maybe by chance the wind had blown it out and it had fallen down. And now I know the drone would no longer be any good, but on the tiny, tiny off chance I could recover the memory card and it would still be readable in some way. Yeah, so my idea for this excursion was to come up in here, find the tree, put my drone up there and look around. And that's obviously yet another thing not going according to plan. If that tree did fall down, and if it fell across the road, its top would have been way up over there someplace. The forests of the Oregon Coast Range are probably about as dense of growth as you're going to find any place in Oregon. It generally doesn't get all that cold here, but it's very, very wet all of the time, year-round, and stuff just grows and grows and grows. Now, it is January 1st today, and so a lot of this stuff has lost its leaves for the winter. It doesn't look as even thick and green as it normally would be. Really, my hope was to fly up next to that tree, take a peek up in there. I really didn't think I'd find anything on the ground. Here's the top of a tree. Could very well be the tree. But, man, even if it had come down on the ground here someplace, 6 years worth of debris on this hillside accumulated. This is not gonna happen. Well, that was an even bigger bust than I expected. I mean, I didn't come up here with any expectations at all. I thought it would be at least interesting to find those trees and look, just so that I could know that I had looked. And yeah, I probably should have come here sooner than 6 years later. On my way up in here, when I was still down on the paved roads, I saw a little side road that went down by one of these inland lakes. It looks sort of like, you know, it's on the backside of the lake and it doesn't look very populated. I've never really explored up in there, so it's early in the day, I might just go and check it out. The rest of these hills themselves, I've actually scoured through quite a bit. A lot of this land is sort of checkerboard interspersed with privately owned lands, usually held by timber companies. It's a lot of driving gravel roads through the forest and then running into gates. So let's go look at something different. Now, this little road is not part of the national forest, and so I'm not sure if there might be homes down in here. It looks like the road follows the lake pretty closely. Oh yeah, there are homes. So this road down along the lake ended up being sort of tucked into the trees and kind of up a hillside, and so it was hard to see the lake some of the time. One thing I noticed at times is that I was paralleling what looked like an old rail line, and I'm sure disused, but every now and then I could see down to the lake where the rail line was actually just going right across the water. And here I finally found sort of an access to it. Let's take a look at this. When I saw the condition of these rails, along with no signage of any sort and a footpath leading right up onto the railway, I assumed this was a decommissioned line. However, it turns out that one freight train per day does travel this route, usually at night. I would not have walked along this railway if I had realized it is still in use. It's generally wise to stay off railroad tracks, and in many cases, you may actually be trespassing. These are American coots, which is not a type of duck. They're common up and down the west coast and beyond. They mostly eat aquatic plants, though given the opportunity, they don't mind making a meal of insects, snails, or salamanders. With the road now more closely following the lakeshore, I'm starting to spot a little more wildlife. I believe this is some kind of cormorant, while an egret pokes around on the opposite shore. These critters having a go at the grass are nutria. While this invasive non-native species is generally considered a destructive pest, their whiskers and webbed feet lend a whimsical impression. Another invasive species that has run rampant along the Oregon coast is European beach grass. It has rapidly and completely shrouded these dunes to my left. When I would come here as a child, these dunes were still mostly exposed sand.
Well, we lost our nice sunny sky we had earlier. This isn't exactly my favorite part of the coast, but it was close enough to where I was at. And if I'm this close to the ocean, there's no way I'm not going to go out on the beach.
come to the mouth of the river where jetties stretch their rocky arms beyond the surf, forming safe passage for seafaring vessels. On the ocean side of the jetty, the white-capped waters are distinctly more turbulent. It's New Year's Day, and the beach is more populated than it normally would be on a midwinter Monday. A family event this evening means I must turn the truck towards town. While this turned into a day of unplanned improvising, I'm fortunate that the wild and varied ecosystems of Oregon reliably yield new discoveries on every outing. I hope you've enjoyed today's excursion as much as I did. Thank you for watching.